Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I'm honored to have back with me someone I consider a friend and someone who is an amazing patriot, an incredibly courageous patriot, Patrick Byrne. Now, many of you know Patrick as the person who was one of the founders and the CEO of brought Overstock.com to, well, all of our doorsteps. Yeah. But then many people remember Patrick Byrne as the person who took on Wall Street and who launched a campaign against the big money folks about illegal naked short selling. Now, you might say, well, that affects just some big name people. Oh, no.
If you have a pension, it affected you.
It does. If you have a pension, if you have $1 in the stock market, if whatever it might be, it affects you. And Patrick was targeted for his courage. Yeah, you were.
Let's not go into all that.
You were. No, you were. Well, it sets the trend.
The naked short selling, and it's not about me being targeted. I figured out that 08 was going to happen in 2008. I figured out in 05 that 08 was about to happen because of a flaw in Wall Street, and I went public about it. And they spun it as, this is because this guy's a victim and they attacked his company and stuff. That's all beside the point. I figured in 05, I knew that 08 was going to happen, and I tried to stop it. That's really the short way to say it.
And tens of thousands of other people could have, but did not. But you did. That's an important point. You're very humble. That's the other part about Patrick Byrne. He's humble and modest. Now Patrick has started to look at election issues, even before November 3rd. And he assembled a team of patriots, of IT gurus, to look at the election process, both before November 3rd, and on November 3rd, and after November 3rd. And he's dedicated his efforts to helping truly save the Republic. You know, General Flynn was recently on this platform. We had an opportunity to interview him, and he spoke about a soft coup, and that the election was being used as a soft coup.
That's just what's happening.
And that is exactly what's happening.
I can walk you folks through that if you'd like. And I think it's time, the people's general, I'm glad to hear Flynn is out there saying that. I've been biting my tongue because I know from my time fighting Wall Street, the rule of thumb is, how do you get the public to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I wasn't going to, and I've been dishing out one spoonful at a time for the last 2 weeks, but we don't have time for this. It is time. I'm saying this absolutely is a soft coup. I can tell you just who's behind it. There's three components to the election system you need to understand. I'm going to hold up my water to represent Venezuela because it's down there on the Caribbean. There's Dominion, and there is Untitled, which is the vote tabulation company. And it's over in Spain, but its servers are really in Frankfurt. Smartmatics, the software, is absolutely Hugo Chavez creation. I can walk you through the how and the why and such. There's a beautiful backstory. Dominion, in October 6th of this year, 4 weeks before our election, Dominion took a $400 million investment / buyout from a Chinese bank. Who's the Chinese bank? It's called Credit Suisse. Now you're saying, oh, isn't that a Swiss bank? No, Credit Suisse is a Chinese bank. They bought it. And the Chinese bank put $400 million into Dominion. And then Untitled, this company, this European company based in Barcelona, declared bankruptcy back in June of this year. And its assets were purchased by another company, which began using the name Untitled. Often companies, when there's some no good nicks and you want to sort of seal off your trail, you do this. You have one company declare bankruptcy, the assets get stripped out and put in another, and this all is just rubble. And then when the investigators show up, it's just a pile of rubble they got to sift through. That was done in June. The people who bought it have two dubious connections. One is to George Soros and one is to Venezuela. And in particular, the guy Venezuela for 20 years has had kind of a front agency, PR agency lobbying group in New York. And I'm not prepared to name them yet, but it's a guy out of that group, out of that Venezuelan linked PR / lobbying group, has gone and been part of this deal with Untitled. Guess who else is part of it? It's a deal. I don't want to say. Believe it or not, Kamala Harris's husband shows up with some connection into one of the companies I just named. I'm not ready to talk about more about that, but Kamala Harris's husband is linked to one of these. But that's not the main event. Set that aside. The point is that there's three companies, the ones that provide the software, the ones that provide the machinery that runs the elections, and the one that tabulates. The ones that provide the software is a creation of Hugo Chavez, Venezuela. The one that does Dominion has, in a month before election, a Chinese bank took it over with a $400 million cash infusion and took it over. And the one that does the tabulation is a George Soros / Venezuela. So, America, you need to understand that our election systems are now being provided and operated by Venezuelan, Chinese, and Venezuelan / Soros entities. That's who just ran our election. Our election got hacked. This is a slow coup. And by hack, I don't mean necessarily just the narrow term of sitting at a keyboard and playing games. You can hack. Computer science people use hack to mean you can hack in a concert if you find a way to sneak into it. Just hacking a process means beating it. You're beating it. You're cheating it. There's all kinds of ways to hack this, that they could have hacked this, both physical security of the computers and QSnatch malware and these kinds of things, but also ballot integrity. And with really a very small number of people, well organized but small in number, you can steal something like Georgia. You can steal the election in Georgia. And they've done that, and it is part of it is not a coincidence that 4 weeks before the election, a Chinese bank injected and took over Dominion, and that this all comes out of. I'd love to tell you or your viewers the story behind Smartmatic and why this is so treacherous for us.
Please do.
Okay, Hugo Chavez came to power in '98. I happened to have been dating a Venezuelan girl at the time, and so I was following. There was a coup or something against him, but he got out after a few days. And in 2000, he started a 6-year presidential term. But the way the Constitution is written is after 3 years, there can be a referendum. So coming up on December 2003, coming up on his referendum, he knew he was down 40 to 60. Now, meanwhile, a group of Venezuelan young scientists, computer scientists, moved to Florida and started Smartmatic.
Mm-hmm.
And in Boca Raton, and they went over to Italy, and they got some they got some Olivetti lottery machines, and they converted them into voting machines using software that created a system that Hugo Chavez could cheat in the December 2003 election. They got it all down, went down and ran the election. Hugo Chavez ended up winning 60-40. And of course, they've never lost anything since then. And thus was born this system. So it really grew out of Hugo Chavez's need to steal the 2003 referendum in Venezuela. By 2006 or so, it was being used in elections in Chicago. And it's been propagating since then. They have licensed their software to Dominion. Dominion, it's a little bit like when you buy a Dell computer, the computer is Dell, but the software is Microsoft.
Right.
When you have a Dominion machine, the machine is Dominion, but the software inside it is Smartmatic, and it's under license to them. And they tried to hide that forever. Finally, in like 2015, they came out and had to acknowledge it. There was a legal case in Puerto Rico where a whole bunch of this stuff got exposed. I'm going to start putting more of the documentation on this up on Deep Capture. So what is happening is a joint Venezuelan-Chinese Soros operation. They have this is a slow coup. And if we fall for this election is so dirty. And if we fall for it, I think it's the last free election. I think we're Venezuela.
Well, the recent CEO of Smartmatic, Lord Mark Malloch Brown, who's no longer the CEO of Smartmatic, it's my understanding George Soros this past week named him as president of George Soros's Open Society Foundation, which does a lot of money laundering, as far as I can tell, shifting money into organizations to do the dirty.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call that money laundering, but they do. Lord Malloch Brown has been tight with Soros for years. He's had all kinds of positions in Soros's hedge funds and Open Society already. No, he's been associated with the Open Society for years. He's been had a some sort of, I forget, board, some sort of senior position there for years. He's been associated with Soros for years. And there's another company that is Venezuelan's front company, or no, I shouldn't say front company. A fellow from that company, I think it's called FTI. I'm blocking on the name a little bit, and but that company has also gotten, this is Soros cronies, Venezuelan cronies, and Chinese money. And there's three points in the system they had to steal, and they stole all three. The software, the Smartmatic software, is Venezuelan. Dominion is now a Chinese firm, essentially. It's a Chinese bank, took it over from the inside. And the SEC filings are public, that they got this huge $400 million capital infusion. It's not disclosed what they got for it, but I'm sure it's control of the company. And then they have the accounting systems, the CITL systems, is Soros and a guy linked to Venezuela. And those are the people running this U.S. election which had all kinds of enormous irregularities in it, such as we haven't seen in our lifetimes. When have you ever heard of a tabulation center being shut down for a water main break? And yet it happened in 5 places. And what do you know? They were exactly the cities that you had to cheat in order to get. And what do you know? While they were shut down, everyone has stories of hundreds of thousands of ballots coming in or being pulled in suitcases out from under tables and running through, and they're 99.4% for one candidate. You can look up Google Smartmatic and scandals, and you will discover that everywhere Smartmatic has been used, from Africa to the Philippines, Smartmatic is embroiled in these scandals. Because everywhere, it's basically when you have a dirty politician who wants to remain in power, he can bring in Smartmatic/Dominion and know that he can cheat and keep himself in power.
So, Patrick, before we went on air, I spoke to you about something that I spoke about on our radio show this past Sunday. Right before I went on air live this past Sunday, it was announced that there was vote flipping through the Smartmatic/Dominion machines in a small county in Georgia by the name of Ware, W-A-R-E, that the Trump votes were flipped to Biden votes. And which was kind of surreal in our conversation, because you said, you didn't know about Where, and you said, let me guess how many people were voters.
Well, you said there were 37 votes flipped.
I said 37 votes flipped, according to the analysts, from Trump to Biden. And you said, let me guess how many people were in that county that voted. And what did you get? And what did you say?
I guess there were about 15. There were about 15,000 people in the county then, right? And he looked it up, and
it was 14,952.
Yeah, we've got their system down. We have their patterns. We know how they're doing it, and so the vote flipping of 0.2%, which is basically the lead Biden has, is 0.2%. You're going to find I know of at least one other place that it was 0.2%. They're flipping about 0.2% of the votes in the rural areas. Rural, heavily red, maybe in some places much more. Yeah, we know in some places much more, like hundreds. But there seems to be this stable, that's a ratio I bet you're going to see more of, because that 0.2%, and that's how I got there.
So on November 4th, a good buddy of mine, former senator...
Or that would be sort of closer even to... what would that anyway, that's about right.
So on November 4th, the morning of the election, when I went to bed in Michigan here, President Trump was up 300,000 votes. And I woke up and he was behind 30,000 votes. And I called a good buddy of mine who'd been down at the TCF Center in Detroit, Pat Colbeck, former senator, and I said, Pat, he goes, there's all kinds of problems. He goes, there's this little county in the lower peninsula of Michigan that there's some really big stuff problems there in Antrim County. And it turns out that I believe there were 6,000 votes flipped there. Well, let me fast forward to this past Sunday show. It was announced right before my show went on air that some analysts were being sent up to, and this has been confirmed through Jenna Ellis, one of the attorneys, to Antrim County to dissect, to look at to do a forensic analysis on these voting machines. And immediately when I got off air, I was being told that, this is the whole voter fraud issue, this election fraud issue is just a conspiracy theory. And the fact that analysts are going up there to take a look at that, that's complete fabrication. Pat, am I fabricating stuff when I talk about this?
No, you're not fabricating. And while I have to be, and I'm going to be super careful and respectful of any judicial temperaments in that regard, I can confirm Jenna Ellis's story. Jenna Ellis said on CBS that there was a jet full of hackers or something going up there. I can confirm, I have personal knowledge that that story is correct. And I can even probably say, I suppose that it was my jet. But but other than that, anything out of that, we want to be super respectful. I mean, I can confirm Jenna Ellis was correct because it was my jet and people I know. But other than that, I shouldn't say anything, or I'm not going to say anything about what was obtained or what might have been obtained and things like that.
And then I had another group of folks say, well, even if you are right with this conspiracy thing about people going up and forensically looking at these machines, well, the election happened November 3rd. If there was some dirty done, it was already done, and potentially those machines have been wiped because, and the reason why those people actually have some merit in their saying is this past week, Attorney General of the state of Michigan, Dana, she put out a note, a memorandum that within 7 days, I believe, of the canvassing being finalized, the voting machine should be scrubbed.
How odd.
Dana Nessel is her name. So, I mean, Pat, here's the deal. If I did that as Joe Public, scrubbed, if I scrubbed information that was potentially, where there was a potential litigation issue involved, that would be like, I think I'd be held for obstruction of justice.
Well, if you did it after you received a subpoena, you would be. And if you did it in anticipation of receiving a subpoena, I think that probably goes to guilty conscience or levels of intent. They're going full goon. They understand that they're caught red-handed. There's anyone who's telling you this is a myth or something or a fantasy, they're living under a rock. There's thousands of people who've come forward around the country with affidavits, with movies. All of it lines up with exactly what I'm saying about how you would steal an election using these systems, which they did. We're living under a rock to deny that, to not to see the pattern and see how the same thing was done. And the pipes knew to break in exactly the right cities that they needed to break, that any political scientist would tell you, these are the cities you have to steal to steal those states and to flip the Electoral College. That all really happened. And it doesn't matter what they wipe. It does. The data is too many places. The data is too many places. That we are up against a clock.
Yes.
They've done everything they can. We're up against a shot clock. They've done everything they can to play snowball and slow it down. The judge in Georgia waited 10 days to give Sidney Powell a response and gave a response that could have been written in a minute. And it was, they were trying to slow walk this until what really is going to happen is people will just feel defeated. And they say, well, it's close enough and maybe it won't be so bad. And well, let me tell you, it will be so bad. I've been to Venezuela. I was there a couple of years ago. I lived in China, 83, 84. I've lived in Marxist countries and countries that are authoritarian, and Americans have no idea what you're giving up. They have no idea what's coming for them. This will be the last free election if this is allowed to stand. Look at the goons. I mean, Biden is actually bringing some people in already that have links to Venezuela. He brought one person in, I'm going to be writing about, who has a real link to Venezuelan money. He's bringing in hard left people, and this will be the last free election we ever have as a country.
Patrick, when we were together, we also spoke about, you mentioned this group, Citel, they're based in Barcelona, Spain, links into Frankfurt, Germany. We talked about votes being sent over the internet to Europe for counting purposes and potential manipulation purposes. Many people found that hard to believe at the time. In fact, since then, Rudy Giuliani at the hearings in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Michigan brought an individual forward, Colonel Phil Waldron, who confirmed that they had white hats that saw this.
Yep.
In fact, occurring.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I can give you something one of your people can look up. I've got it somewhere. Maybe I'll post it, but better if somebody looks up. There's a German computer science professor from, I believe, Heidelberg or Hamburg or something, Hamburg, who was writing in the kind of place that people who study internet bandwidth go. I mean, a real techie kind of place. And he, on maybe around a week after the election, he remarked on the spike in bandwidth that was running between the U.S. and Frankfurt on the night of our election. In the hours of our election, the bandwidth went up sort of faster. They expected it to grow there in about 3 years, and instead, in one evening, it suddenly spiked.
Whoa!
And it was the hours of our election in the United States, and that's in some German. It was a German computer science professor. That's online. I'm gonna have to find that and tweet it. It was a very obscure source, but one of these hackers found, and that he didn't know anything about the claims the work we were doing, but he noticed this enormous bandwidth spike. It was in the terabytes. It went from like 7 terabytes to 10 terabytes per second. So it was something like that, and it was while we were conducting our election in the U.S. So that would be, I think, a strong confirmation point that this data was getting piped to Frankfurt, Germany for tabulation. Listen, I happen to know, I might as well reveal, I saw a business plan about 20 years ago for Seidel. At the time, it was proposed as I think it was through J.P. Morgan, and it was proposed as a company to get behind that it was going to help end corruption. We were going to have the world was going to have one company that did all the vote tabulation, and then the idea would be we would get other countries to pipe our election data to this one place, and they would do all the tabulation so we would know it clean. There was a business plan that was floated in front of me about 16 or 18 years ago about Seidel. And I remember that plan. It's really a weird coincidence. But that's how it was. It was kind of posed as the thing that, like, socially conscious rich guys should get behind because the world needs some central, uncorruptible source of the truth to handle elections. And then it was going to be set up. I thought it was going to be Switzerland or something, but it was going to be set. I didn't invest. But that's the company Seidel. That's how it was sold. And yes, it does have data piped to it, and it does tabulation there. Now, it's based in Barcelona, but its computers are in Frankfurt. And I find Frankfurt interesting because there are some other ties with Frankfurt between, if you look up, and this is open source, but if you look up where there's a group called Baltimore Station, the Silk Road Task Force. The Silk Road Task Force was a group of computer government people who were chasing the Silk Road. It was called Baltimore Station. It moved to Baltimore from Frankfurt. It was over in Frankfurt at the consulate. And it was the center of gravity of U.S. hacking efforts against Cozy Bear and these Russian things. And this is all open source. You can read this open source. The people who were involved in that Frankfurt station included a guy named Pianka. Pianka was one of the FBI agents who later interviewed Flynn.
Whoa.
It also was done under the signature of Rosenstein. It was also done under there were 2 agents there who later went to prison for stealing Bitcoin. They're serving 7 years. One was a DEA and one was a Secret Service. And it also included a guy who went off and started CrowdStrike. He became the president of CrowdStrike.
Really?
CrowdStrike is the DNC's cyber company. And when the DNC got hacked, they didn't turn the machine. They brought in CrowdStrike, and they told them, write a report that said Russia did this. Russia didn't. I don't buy that, incidentally, and I can walk you through the technical. Basically, whoever stole those emails out of the DNC, what they stole, one thing that press always neglects to mention, the email showed that that the DNC had cheated Bernie out of the primary and giving it to Hillary. That's what they showed. Mm-hmm. Everyone always neglects what did they show. They were also downloaded, the computer forensics showed, at speeds of up to 36 megabytes per second. this originally allegedly was being done from Russia through VPNs, they would not have been able to get anything over a couple megabytes per second. So that really is suggestive somebody inside downloaded it onto a thumb drive where you would have download speeds like that, which is, of course, brings in Seth Rich. Here's the funny thing. What was Seth Rich doing within the DNC? Go and look this up. Have your researchers go and look this up. What was Seth Rich before he got killed? He had a particular position in the DNC that would have put him in a position to know all the things you're now hearing, that you can use Dominion machines
it's about voter
to
integrity.
steal elections or primaries. Look up, find out what his position was in the DNC, and you will now understand. He understood that Hillary had cheated Bernie out of the primary, not just from some emails.
No.
He understood because he was the guy in the DNC. Well, I'm going to leave it to you to look that up, and your viewers find out what Seth Rich, before he was killed, what was his role in the DNC. And it was a role that I'm asserting would put him in a position to have known everything that we're now saying, that the Dominion servers had been used in the primaries to steal from Bernie and give to Hillary.
And if I remember correctly, actually, Patrick, to put people on the right track, I believe it was related to voter integrity issues.
Correct. Around the primaries.
Mm-hmm.
He would have had a knowledge of all of this stuff being done within the primary service from the position he was. So I'd love you to research what was the name of his position before, just when he was whacked. They could not have let a guy who had the kind of knowledge we're now talking about. He could have been walking around. They couldn't let him walk around if he wasn't on board.
And Patrick, getting back to Frankfurt, from Wikileaks, this is one of their releases, March 8th, 2017. Again, Wikileaks never been found to be wrong about one of their releases. This is what they said, March 8th, 2017. In addition to its headquarters in Langley, Virginia, the U.S. CIA also uses the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, exactly what you spoke about, as a covert base for its hackers covering Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. CIA hackers operating out of the Frankfurt consulate, the Center for Cyber Intelligence Europe, or CCIE, are given diplomatic black passports and State Department cover. The instructions for incoming CIA hackers make Germany's counterintelligence efforts appear inconsequential. WikiLeaks, March 8th, 2017.
Well, I knew that was out 2017, March. What day was that?
March 8th, 2017.
I like it when I do interviews where I learn more than I share.
No, that's not true.
I knew that was out in the public. I wasn't sure where, but yeah. That group you were just describing spawned a number of interesting players. That group was operating under Rosenstein's signature. Mm-hmm. That group had two feds who went to jail. It had a guy named Pianka, who was later, coincidentally, the guy who walked in with Peter Strzok and interviewed Michael Flynn.
Right.
And it had the guy who went and formed CrowdStrike, who wrote, I mean, this is funny. Remember how CrowdStrike, they are the ones who allegedly said that Russia was behind the DNC hack.
Right.
That was for years and years. That was what was being said. When they put the president of CrowdStrike under oath in the House, you know what it turned out he said when they finally released it?
That they never even looked at the servers.
Well, CrowdStrike did, but they had zero evidence
zero
that it come from Russia.
Yeah.
They went under oath when he had to answer the question. He had zero evidence that it come from Russia. No evidence whatsoever that they had made that claim. And as I say, the downwith speeds are inconsistent with somebody. If you were 2 blocks away, or if you were 10 blocks away over VPN, you would not have speeds of 36 megabytes per second. I mean, if that was an outside hack, they would never have been able to get to the download speed that they achieved. It would have been within a factor of 10. So, and certainly not from Russia. So so the other side, what they've been holding up for years is, well, the CrowdStrike guys said that it was from Russia. The CrowdStrike guys. Yeah. And guys like us have been saying, well, look at the confluence of facts around Seth Rich and around, here's this thing that forensic evidence shows they were downloaded at up to 36 megabytes per second. Couldn't have happened. And they just waved this piece of paper. Well, CrowdStrike says it was Russia. When they finally got the CrowdStrike leader, who is the same guy we just discussed from that operation in Frankfurt, when he got under oath in the House, in the closed hearings that Adam Schiff wouldn't let the world know, but who was at Radcliffe finally declassified, and it turned out 53 people in a row, the same people who were going on television saying, yeah, we have hardcore, clear indication that Russia and Trump were colluding. When you get them under oath, they all said, Clapper, all these guys said, well, actually, I can't name you any evidence that was ever given to us. Similarly, when that CrowdStrike guy was put under oath, the guy they'd been waiving his report for all this time, he goes under oath. He says, actually, we had no evidence whatsoever that Russia was behind it.
In addition, two legends, Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe, who are friends of mine, also came to that same conclusion about what really happened, that it was an internal download rather than a hack through the internet. Yeah, Kirk called me last night, and he and Bill and a team have also been looking at some issues. And listen to this one, Patrick. No one knows this yet, but it's about to become public. They were looking at Georgia, and they looked at 6 million registered voters in Georgia. Of the 6 million registered voters, 2 million registered voters of those 6 had one thing in common.
The same phone number?
Their birth dates all were January 1st of different years.
That's interesting.
So the odds of 2 million out of 6 million people all being born on January 1st of a certain year, I think are pretty small.
No, of any year. No, it would be, astronomically small. That's just like there's another state, we're looking at the voter records where a certain county, one of the 6 counties where we're alleging this took place, in the 90 days leading up to the election of 2016, there were 140 new voter registrations in that county. In the 90 days leading up to this election, there were over 13,000 new voter registrations in that county. And guess what? 350 of them have one phone number.
Oh.
And they give addresses like, the MGM Grand Hotel. And 350 have one phone number, and there's another phone number that was another couple hundred of them or something. That's all. There's 40. I mean, there's so many tens of thousands of votes that you can just eliminate from that kind of stuff in areas, before you even get to call that the wholesale side. Then there's the industrial side, which is when they just actually shut down the voting booths and run stacks of fresh ballots through and things like that. That's the industrial scale. So there's retail election fraud, which you might call voter fraud. Then there's that middle thing, like we're talking 13,000. That tells me a couple people went to Vegas. That was, or a couple people went to where you were talking about in Georgia, and they buy a dozen burner phones, and they just go in and fill out hundreds of registrations, all tied to one phone. So, yeah, they got sloppy that way. And I'm sure all those phones have been destroyed. But
I'd like your impression of another individual and a center that he and his wife have benevolently funded. The Zuckerberg-funded group comes into spotlight in election-related court cases. This is from Epoch Times. A group that received hundreds of millions of dollars from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is accused in post-election lawsuits of contributing to constitutional violations in key battleground states. The Center for Tech and Civic Life, oh, what a beautiful organization, a national nonprofit based in Illinois, provided funding to over 2,500 election offices across the country to run elections amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Funds were used, Patrick, to pay poll workers, put up ballot drop boxes, acquire mail-in ballot equipment and supplies. The money was also spent through agreements that had municipalities run elections in contravention to state law. The agreements between the Center for Tech Life and Civic Life and cities required cities to develop a plan for their elections and submit it to the center. And here's the best part. Some of the money, Patrick, also went to judges overseeing the election. $400 million by Mark and
happens to be the same number that the Chinese just injected into Dominion.
Same number.
Like they're equal partners. Who knows?
Yeah, his wife, Priscilla Chan. Interesting.
All I can say is that Zuckerberg's Chinese sucks. I speak Chinese. I haven't had to speak it daily for 35 years, and he speaks, and it's painful for me to hear his crap Chinese. It's like a sophomore. So I don't mean to be a Mandarin snob about it, but I am a Mandarin snob, and his Chinese is like so grating on my ear. That's all I can't get past that fact about Zuckerberg.
Yeah, there's a lot of things about him that
And if he's married, if he's been married to a Chinese-speaking woman for years and he still sounds like he does, that tells me everything I need to know about Mark Zuckerberg.
Patrick, many people are concerned that, as you mentioned earlier, the clock is running out. And we got all this evidence. If you listened to Sidney Powell in court the other day in Georgia, the judge, she said, just let me present the evidence. And the judge was like, no. In Michigan, at that hearing, no evidence was presented. Many people are concerned. Clock is running out. We got a judicial system where they're saying, I don't want to, hear no evil, seek no evil, speak no evil. I don't want to hear the evidence. Patrick, is this going to, I'm hoping somewhere along the line, at least through the Supreme Court, this evidence is presented.
Yeah, it will get presented. First of all, people should understand state courts are highly politicized still. I mean, they're still, and between a combination of politicization or maybe other mechanisms, including, you never know, I mean, there's death threats being bandied around and stuff. There's, you can't trust anything coming out of state courts on this. The good thing about all this is everything will be revealed. This is the end of the line, and everything's going to be revealed. And those who've been trying to explain to the world how corrupt we've become are, as a society, there's all the evidence is going to be there. Like when it's clear to America what happened, I want Americans to go back and look at the role the media played and how quickly they were rushed. Oh yeah, President-elect Biden giving his Thanksgiving address, on television, which drew less than 1,000 live stream viewers. The guy who allegedly got 80 million votes. Yeah, the state courts are going weak in the knees, or they're co-opted or threatened or whatever. It's got to go to the Supreme Court, and the breadth and scale of this is such it should be in the Supreme Court. And here I will make a comment for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court went weak in the knees once, and it really destroyed America. In 1936, Roosevelt was not able to get through a bunch of the things he wanted to do in his first 4 years because they were flagrantly unconstitutional. And in 1936, he threatened to pack the Supreme Court. And what the Supreme Court should have done is stuck to their principles. And then if Roosevelt went to pack it, fought it, and that's what they should have done. Instead, they came back in the spring of 1937 with a bunch of decisions where they reinterpreted the Constitution philosophically. They just started breaking with previous constitutional law. They punched a hole in the Constitution from which we have never recovered. The Supreme Court has to stand tall in the saddle, ride tall in the saddle. This is absolutely a coup taking place against the United States. This is going to get to them. John Roberts is a politician. He's a politician. He may be compromised, but you all know about the. I got his logbook, the logbook from the Lolita Express that shows he took a trip on. Well, a man named John Roberts was flown by a man named Epstein on the Lolita Express. Maybe that's why he's compromised. But who knows what. But if they fold on this one like they did in 1937, it's the end of America as we know it. It's the end of America. Roberts is a politician, and he's going to say, I care about the institution of the Supreme Court and this and that and the other thing, and I don't want the Supreme Court to be stepping in and fixing elections. Well, if you care about the institution of the Supreme Court, it's about to be packed. If these goons take over, they're going to pack it. Mm-hmm. That's the end of it as we know it. And, they're openly asking for this kind of stuff.
Yes.
So I would say that is, if they don't stand tall, if they don't ride tall in the saddle this time, we get what we deserve. It's all going to come down to the Supreme Court, and they absolutely have to look at the breadth and the scale of this and say it is so extraordinary. Some extraordinary measures called for. Whether it is then kicked to the House, whether they order revotes, in a perfect world, they'd order revotes in those 6 states, maybe managed by the military or somebody that we could all trust. They're not going to do that. There's no constitutional provision. I don't know what the remedy is, but they can't sit. The evidence is absolutely clear from an intelligence point of view that this was this was an attack by Venezuela and China and people connected with Soros. And there's no question. All 3 links, the software, the machinery, and the tabulation centers have all been conquered. Well, Smartmatics has been Venezuelan from the get-go, but Dominion and Seidel have been taken over this year in the last 6 months. They both had extraordinary events. One had a big investment from a Chinese bank, and one declared bankruptcy and moved itself into a new company, like shed its skin. So it'd be very difficult to investigate. And that new company, the people behind it have connections to Soros in Venezuela, deep connections. So if we let this happen, if we let George Soros, Venezuela, and China take us down, and the Supreme Court's going to stand by like a bunch of Philadelphia lawyers and be lawyers about it, then America gets what it deserves. I can't tell you why I lived in these places. I've been to Venezuela a couple years ago. It was like going through The Walking Dead. I've been many times in China and such. I can't believe that Americans are so uneducated on civics and so uneducated on what made our country work that they're surrendering this. They're surrendering. This is what. Let me go on for one more minute with this quick story. May I?
Please. No, please.
It's called The Assassin's Mace. I should probably write this up. There's been a theory. Well, there was a guy named Michael Pillsbury who came out in 2015 with a book called The 100-Year Marathon. And this guy, who was an old China hand and a lifelong China lover and was part of opening China, came out in 2015, said I was wrong. I was wrong all these years. China is our enemy. They've been using us for 40 years. And actually, there was a 100-year plan that started in 1949 to take us down and turn us into a vassal state. In Chinese worldview, they are the central kingdom on the earth. And everybody should be sort of a vassal junior member in their club. And he found the evidence for this across the literature in the national security community. But to even understand it, you would have to understand Chinese language can be very subtle, and you use these allusions. And in particular, there's a book from 2,500 years ago called The 38 Strategies of the Warring States Period. China went through a 300-year civil war before it was ever one country. It was first unified, and a book was written that's like the lessons we learned, the 36 strategies. And one of them is the Assassin's Mace, and it is to defeat your enemy without having to go to war. Imagine instead of two kingdoms fighting, if you can get an assassin in the right place at the right time and with one stroke take the king out, it's over. And for a decade in Chinese national security literature, there's been references to their assassin's mace, Sha You Jian, the assassin, the killer, the mace of the killer's hand Sha You Jian. And there's been references to that this exists. And our national security community has been trying to figure out what it is. Is it a new hypersonic missile that takes out a battleship or a aircraft carrier? There's been all this speculation. What is the Assassin's Mace? I think we are seeing the Assassin's Mace. I think the Assassin's Mace is you jack our election system. And elections, if we're liberal, philosophical liberalism, the atomic concept of our society is consent of the governed, as expressed through an election. If they can come in and corrupt that or hack it, you can take us off at the ankles. And I believe this is what we're experiencing is the Assassin's Mace. This is a Venezuelan Chinese Soros operation, and they are jacking the United States of America. I hate to be this heavy about it, but that's what's going on. And we don't have time for patty cake stuff. I learned my lesson years ago that, how do you get people to eat an elephant one bite at a time? I've been trying to hold stuff back, but I don't have time anymore. This is a soft coup. It is the Assassin's Mace, and it's absolutely can be linked to Venezuela and China and Soros. And if I say any more than that, I'll start violating judicial orders, and I'm not going to do that.
Patrick, what are the odds that we beat it?
$50-50.
Okay. Best way to beat it?
Maybe 30-40.
Best way to beat it?
Best way to beat it is Americans have to, the judges are politicians deep down, or some of them or some of them believe in rule of law, but many of them are politicians. You got to provide them air cover to do the right thing, to make the right decision. If there are no public protests or acknowledgement of this, they may take the easy way. We have to help them. There are going to be rallies. Look, I did not vote for Donald Trump. Neither time. This is purely this is a national security matter. People, if there's any chance in your faith-based organizations, in your towns, in your cities, to come out and do peaceful protests, that you can demonstrate the discontent and that you're not buying it. I've never told people, I've never been in a protest in my life. I'm not a crowd kind of guy. People have to make visible that you do not believe this, that you're not buying it. What they're doing is they're obviously just trying to ram this narrative down our throats. It's gotten silly. And especially with the thousands of stories that are coming forward in the films and people pulling ballots out of suitcases under a desk and ballot observers being gooned out of centers and being told water main. It's obvious. They have to. You can't stand for this, America. And I'm not sure what the legal boundaries here are. But we can't take this lying down. We can't. This is absolutely a coup. I'm not going to be part. I will not bend a knee to the new. I will not bend a knee to the new reign. This is absolutely incorrect.
Well, George Washington said it. I will die on my feet before I'll live on my knees.
Well, that guy will go places. Yeah, no, really, we can't accept this. This is the end, and we all know it. I mean, anyone who's, I saw that it's over 50% of people in America now know that will say that there was some mishap about this election. I forget the exact wording of the question, but over 50% of people will acknowledge they think that. So you can't accept this. If you do, it is your last free election, and it's what you just look at what happened in Venezuela since then. You'll never beat, you'll have Dominion everywhere. You'll never be able to vote them out. You'll never be able to vote the goons out. And the same guys who are running around in the streets and beating people up in restaurants are the ones that are going to be in charge.
Patrick, you mentioned your website where you upload information, deepcapture.com.
That's correct.
Deepcapture.com.
Yes, sir.
Patrick, I'd like to thank you. You know what? A guy like you, who's a billionaire, could be sitting on the beach right now. Instead, you've chosen to be the point of the spear and fight the fight. And
Don't remind me.
Well, I'm very sincere when I say this. I am grateful, thankful for all that you have done, are doing, and will do. I am grateful that you have the courage and the talent to bring this information forward, because I believe it's that information that'll ultimately lead to demise of this deep state apparatus that we're battling for our freedom.
This is, well, I appreciate that. This country's been better to me than I had any talent or merit to expect. So it seems like the least I can do. But I know that we're really crossing. Well, they crossed a line here. They've crossed a line this year. They've been crossing a line for months and disorienting you, America, and getting you in a position that you feel defeated and you're willing to accept anything. And now they're cramming down a jacked election down your throat. And this isn't about Biden, Trump. This is about the Kamala Harris, the people who want to pack the Supreme Court, the people who are saying everything's on the table, like Chuck Schumer. They do not recognize the Republican form of government, limited government. We will be living in an unlimited, in some emergency state. So you can't, I don't know what exactly I'm saying, other than under no circumstances should you accept this election. It absolutely 100% was rigged. And it was rigged not by some dirty Democrats. It's Venezuela and China are all over this, absolutely behind this. And then Soros shows up, and the Soros-related figures are also involved.
Pat, again, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. Deepcapture.com, folks. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Thanks for your time today. Dream big and dare to fail.